Welcome to Historian Diary. Today, I'm going to tell you about something that Western history books deliberately ignored for 50 years. Something that Soviet veterans refused to discuss. Something that Russia continues to deny to this day. Between April and June 1945, in the final chaotic months of World War II, at least 2 million German women were raped by Soviet soldiers. In Berlin alone, over 100,000 women were sexually assaulted. The youngest victim on record was 8 years old. The oldest was 80. And when British historian Antony Beevor published documented evidence of these mass rapes in 2002, the Russian ambassador to Britain called it lies, blasphemy, and slander. This isn't Nazi propaganda. This isn't Cold War exaggeration. This is documented fact, pulled from Soviet military archives that remained sealed until the collapse of the Soviet Union. And the scale of what happened makes it, in Beevor's words, the greatest phenomenon of mass rape in history. The question that haunts this story: how did the West ignore 2 million rapes? And why does Russia still refuse to acknowledge what its own archives prove? Subscribe to Historian Diary, because what I'm about to tell you comes from Soviet military documents, NKVD secret police reports, hospital records from Berlin, abortion statistics, survivors' diaries, and testimony from Soviet veterans themselves. This happened. The evidence is overwhelming, and the silence that followed is almost as disturbing as the crime itself. Let's start with Berlin in April 1945. The city is surrounded. Everyone knows the war is over. Hitler is in his bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery, issuing increasingly delusional orders to armies that no longer exist. On April 12th, the Berlin Philharmonic gives what everyone understands will be its final performance. The program: Wagner's Geistermeering Twilight of the Gods, as the audience files out into the rubble-strewn streets. Members of the Hitler Youth hand out cyanide capsules to any Berliners who prefer suicide to what's coming. They knew what was coming. Radio broadcasts from the Eastern Territories had been describing Soviet behavior for months. Refugees flooding into Berlin from East Prussia, Pomerania, and Silesia brought stories of systematic rape, of women violated in front of their families, of entire towns where every female had been assaulted. German propaganda seized on these stories, of course, using them to terrify the population into continued resistance. But here's the thing about Nazi propaganda in this case: it wasn't exaggerated. If anything, it understated what was about to happen. The Red Army that arrived at Berlin's outskirts on April 16, 1945, was not the same army that had fought desperately to defend Stalingrad 3 years earlier. This was an army that had seen what Nazi Germany did to the Soviet Union. They had liberated concentration camps. They had walked through villages where the Wehrmacht had hanged every male over the age of 15. They had found the mass graves. They had seen the scorched earth. Soviet casualties in World War II totaled roughly 27 million people. 27 million. To put that in perspective, that's more than the current population of Australia. The Soviet Union lost more people in World War II than all other Allied nations combined out. So when Soviet soldiers crossed into German territory in January 1945, they were not in a forgiving mood. And their commanders had given them explicit permission for revenge. Comment below. Can systematic war crimes ever be justified by prior atrocities? Where's the line? Let me read you something. This is from Soviet war correspondent Natalia Jess, a close friend of physicist and later dissident Andrei Sakharov. Jess described the Soviet army in Germany in 1945 as an army of rapists. She wrote that Soviet soldiers raped German females from 8 to 80 years old. That's not metaphor. That's literal. Hospital records from Berlin confirm rapes of girls as young as 8 and women as old as 84. Here's what the numbers look like. Antony Beevor, working from Soviet archives, medical records, and demographic analysis, estimates that at least 1.4 million women were raped in East Prussia, Pomerania, and Silesia alone. That's before the army even reached Berlin. In Berlin itself, the most reliable estimates put the number at a minimum of 100,000 women raped during the 2-month period from late April to June 1945. But that number is almost certainly too low because it's based on hospital records and abortion requests, and most rapes went unreported. Some women were raped once, many were raped multiple times. According to historian William Hitchcock, in many cases, women were victims of repeated rapes, some as many as 60 to 70 times. Think about that number, 60 times. That's not random violence. That's systematic brutalization. The pattern was consistent across every town and city the Red Army occupied. Soviet soldiers would arrive, often drunk on looted alcohol. They would search houses for women, cellars, attics, hiding places nowhere was safe. Women who resisted were beaten or killed. Women who submitted were raped anyway. Age didn't matter. Appearance didn't matter. German ethnicity didn't matter. Soviet soldiers also raped Polish women who had been held in forced labor camps. They raped Russian women who had been deported to Germany for work. They raped Jewish women who had just been liberated from concentration camps. One Soviet officer, interviewed years later, described what he witnessed. We were young, strong, and 4 years without women. So we tried to catch German women. 10 men raped 1 girl. There were not enough women. The entire population ran from the Soviet army, so we had to take young, 12 or 13-year-olds. If she cried, we put something into her mouth. We thought it was fun. Now I cannot understand how I did it. A boy from a good family. But that was me. A woman telephone operator from the Soviet army recalled, when we occupied every town, we had first 3 days for looting and rapes. That was unofficial, of course. But after 3 days, one could be court-martialed for doing this. 3 days. That was the informal rule in many units. The first 72 hours after taking a city, soldiers could do whatever they wanted. After that, discipline might be enforced. Might not thank you for watching this far. Comment below. How? Do we remember mass atrocities committed by Allied forces? Should we? Now let's talk about what the commanders knew and what they did about it. The Soviet archives reveal something shocking. The command structure was fully aware of the mass rapes and largely tolerated them. KVD reports, that's the Soviet secret police, documented the rapes in detail and sent reports up the chain of command. Political officers filed complaints. Officers from Soviet allied nations protested. Marshal Konstantin Rokossovsky, commanding Soviet forces in East Prussia, issued a written order in January 1945 instructing soldiers to redirect their feelings of hatred at fighting the enemy on the battlefield rather than attacking civilians. The order had essentially zero effect. Local commanders either ignored the directive or were unable to control their troops. And there's evidence that some actively encouraged the behavior. Why? Because Stalin didn't care. As long as military objectives were achieved, soldier behavior toward German civilians was not a priority. One Soviet major told a British journalist at the time that drinks of every variety, including dangerous chemicals seized from laboratories, and a fanatic desire to have revenge were significant factors behind the Red Army violence. But it wasn't just about revenge. Soviet military culture treated women in occupied territories as spoils of war, legitimate prizes for victorious soldiers. This wasn't unique to the Soviet Army. Militaries throughout history have treated conquered populations this way. But the scale of what happened in Germany in 1945 was unprecedented in modern European warfare. Let me tell you about one survivor whose diary has become the most detailed first-hand account of this period. She was a 34-year-old journalist living in Berlin. We don't know her real name because the diary was published anonymously in Germany in 1954. She described herself as a pale-faced blonde, always dressed in the same winter coat. When the Red Army reached her neighborhood, she hid in the bomb shelter beneath her apartment building, along with 3 elderly women. As Soviet soldiers tried to break into the shelter, the elderly women begged her to plead for mercy because she knew a little Russian. She went up and found a Soviet officer. He listened to her plea and simply said, "It happens anyway," and walked away. She was gang-raped that night, multiple times. When she returned to the shelter, humiliated and bleeding, she wrote, "My stockings are down to my shoes. I'm still holding on to what's left of my suspender belt. I start yelling, 'You pigs! Here! They raped me twice in a row, and you leave me lying like a piece of dirt.'" That's when she made a survival decision that many Berlin women made in those desperate weeks. She found a Soviet officer, someone with enough rank to offer protection, and became his mistress. It was transactional. He got sex. She got protection from gang rape by lower-ranking soldiers. It's horrifying, but it kept her alive. Her diary documents this relationship with brutal honesty, showing the impossible choices women made to survive. When her diary was first published in Germany in 1954, German readers were outraged, not at the Soviet soldiers, but at her. Critics accused her, besmirching the honor of German women by describing survival through sexual compromise. The book went out of print quickly. Germans didn't want to hear about German women as victims. It complicated the narrative of German collective guilt for the Holocaust and the war. Subscribe to Historian, diary for more uncomfortable truths that complicate simple historical narratives. History is messy. People are messy. Acknowledging German suffering doesn't diminish Nazi crimes. Both things can be true. Now let's talk about the aftermath and the consequences. The physical toll was catastrophic. An estimated 240,000 women died in connection with the rapes, from injuries sustained during the assaults, from suicide, or from botched abortions. In Berlin, 90% of women contracted venereal diseases. Syphilis rates exploded. Gonorrhea became endemic. The abortion statistics are particularly revealing. Germany's Article 218, which banned abortion except for medical and eugenic reasons, was effectively suspended for rape victims. In Berlin's Neukölln district alone, just one district out of many 996 abortion requests were approved between June 1945 and June 1946. Most were for pregnancies resulting from rape. Across all of Berlin, the number was in the tens of thousands. That's just the official count. Many women obtained illegal abortions or tried to terminate pregnancies themselves. Suicide rates spiked dramatically. An estimated 10,000 women in Berlin alone committed suicide in the weeks following the Soviet occupation. Mothers killed their daughters and then themselves. Elderly women jumped from windows rather than face rape. The psychological trauma was so severe, so widespread, that it affected an entire generation of German women. But here's what might be most disturbing about this story: the silence that followed. For 50 years, the West largely ignored or minimized what happened. Why? Cold War politics. The Soviet Union was now an ally against Nazi Germany, then an adversary in the emerging Cold War. Western governments didn't want to publicize Soviet war crimes because it complicated the narrative. During the alliance, it was bad form to criticize Stalin's army. During the Cold War, horror stories about Soviet behavior looked like propaganda. German shame also played a role. Post-war Germany was focused on acknowledging and atoning for the Holocaust and Nazi crimes. German suffering seemed secondary, even inappropriate to discuss. How could Germans claim victimhood when they had perpetrated the worst genocide in history? So German women who had been raped stayed silent. Their families stayed silent. Society stayed silent. Soviet archives remained locked until the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. Western historians couldn't access the documents that proved the scale of what happened. They suspected, they had anecdotal evidence, but they couldn't definitively prove mass rape at the scale survivors described. Then, in the 1990s, the archives opened. British historian Antony Beevor was researching his book on Stalingrad when he came across documents about Berlin. He found NKVD reports detailing the rapes. He found Soviet military correspondence acknowledging that troops were out of control. He found political officers complaining about mass sexual violence. He found medical reports from Soviet military doctors treating soldiers for venereal diseases contracted from German civilians. Beevor published Berlin, The Downfall, 1945, in 2002. Book was a sensation in the West, a bestseller in 7 countries. It was also explosive in Russia. The Russian ambassador to Britain, Gregory Karasin, publicly denounced the book as lies, blasphemy, and slander against the people who saved the world from Nazism. Russia's military establishment went further. General Makhmet Guriev, president of the Academy of Military Sciences, said Beevor's work was worse than Joseph Goebbels' propaganda. In 2015, Beevor's books were banned in some Russian schools. The Russian government passed laws making it illegal to denigrate Russia's record in World War II, with penalties including fines and prison sentences. Researchers in Russia who investigate this topic face aggressive pushback. As one Russian researcher noted, people only want to hear about our glorious victory in the Great Patriotic War, and it is getting harder to do proper research. Russia's response isn't surprising. The Great Patriotic War is the foundational myth of modern Russia. Soviet victory over Nazi Germany is the unifying narrative that transcends political changes, economic collapse, and national humiliation. To acknowledge systematic war crimes by Soviet soldiers is to tarnish that victory. And Russia has decided that the myth is more important than the truth. But the evidence is undeniable. The Soviet archives document it. Hospital records confirm it. Survivor testimony corroborates it. Even Soviet veterans who speak honestly admit it. The rapes happened. 2 million German women. The greatest phenomenon of mass rape in recorded history. Comment below. Should nations acknowledge their own war crimes? Or do some crimes deserve to remain in the past? Here's what we can say definitively. The Soviet mass rapes in Germany were not random acts of individual violence. They were the predictable consequence of several factors. Brutal Nazi crimes in the Soviet Union creating a desire for revenge. Soviet military culture that treated women as spoils of war. Command structures that tolerated or ignored sexual violence. Alcohol abuse among troops. And a propaganda campaign that dehumanized all Germans, regardless of age or sex. Does Nazi brutality in the Soviet Union explain Soviet brutality in Germany? Yes. Does it justify it? That's a different question. Rape as revenge is still rape. 8-year-old girls didn't invade Russia. 70-year-old women didn't commit war crimes. The women of Berlin didn't design the Holocaust. Collective punishment of civilians is a war crime, regardless of what other war crimes preceded it. This isn't about creating a moral equivalence between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. What Germany did the Holocaust, the invasion of the Soviet Union, the systematic murder of 27 million Soviet citizens, was monstrous on a scale that defies comprehension. But acknowledging that doesn't require us to ignore what Soviet soldiers did to German women in 1945. Both things happened. Both things were wrong. History isn't a competition of suffering where we rank atrocities and decide Which ones count and which ones get erased for political convenience? The women who survived. The Soviet occupation of Berlin carried their trauma silently for decades. Many never told their families what happened. Their children grew up not knowing. When the anonymous diarist's account was finally republished in English in 2050 years after its German publication, it shocked a new generation of readers who had never learned this aspect of World War II. In 2008, a German film based on the diary was released. Anonyma, Eine Frau in Berlin, a woman in Berlin, brought the story to a wider audience. Some German critics praised it for finally addressing a long-suppressed chapter of German history. Others condemned it for portraying Germans as victims. That debate continues. How do we remember the fall of Berlin? As the liberation of Europe from Nazi tyranny? As the beginning of Soviet domination of Eastern Europe? As the site of mass rape of German civilians? All three are true. History contains multitudes. The Red Army that raped 2 million German women is the same Red Army that liberated Auschwitz. Soviet soldiers who committed war crimes in Berlin also sacrificed 27 million of their countrymen to defeat Hitler. These contradictions don't cancel each other out. They coexist. What happened in Berlin in 1945 matters because silence about war crimes, even war crimes committed by our side, corrupts historical memory. It makes us choose between acknowledging all victims or only ideologically convenient ones. It turns history into propaganda. Antony Beevor put it this way: the question is not whether we should talk about these events, but how we talk about them. Acknowledging Soviet crimes doesn't diminish Soviet sacrifice. It humanizes it. It reminds us that soldiers, even soldiers fighting a just war against an evil enemy, are capable of terrible things when discipline breaks down and revenge becomes policy. Thank you for watching Historian Diary. This is difficult history. History that shows how victory and atrocity can exist simultaneously. How liberation can come with brutalization. How the same nation can be both hero and perpetrator. The Soviet Union saved the world from Nazism. The Soviet Union also committed the greatest mass rape in history. Both statements are true. Both deserve to be remembered. The women of Berlin deserve to be remembered. The 8-year-old girls, the 80-year-old grandmothers, the women who survived 60 rapes, the women who committed suicide, the 10,000 who died, the 2 million who endured. Their suffering doesn't diminish Nazi crimes. But it shouldn't be erased from history because acknowledging it is politically inconvenient. Russia continues to deny it. Western textbooks continue to minimize it. And every year, fewer survivors remain to testify. But the archives are there. The documents exist. The truth is documented. And now you know it. See you next time on Historian Diary.